Alright, so today's lesson is going to be again very similar to what we have been doing. This time it's just going to involve what they call multiple steps, so it might be more than two because sometimes we're going to have the distributive property. So just remember the distributive property, you can easily locate it within a problem if you see parentheses with a number right outside. So in this example, this just means 2 multiplied by everything within, so 2 times x and then 2 times 3. Alright, so to start, we're going to go 2 times x. So 2 times x is 2x, okay? And then we're also going to go 2 times 3. And 2 times 3 is 6. And since they're both positive, just throw a plus sign in the middle. So 2x plus 6. And then that is greater than negative 16. Okay, so you don't multiply the 2 by the 16 because that 16 is on the other side of the inequality and it's not within the parentheses. So those are two no-nos there. Alright, so from here now you're left with the problem like yesterday. You have a two-step equation. You have your multiplication and then you have your addition. Okay, so you always want to get rid of your addition first. So this plus 6, we're going to minus 6 from both sides. Minus 6, minus 6. Okay. And that's going to leave us with, canceling that out, 2x is greater than negative 16 minus 6. Be very careful here. We have two negatives, so you need to add them up. So negative 16 minus 6, that's going to be negative 22. And now we're left with a one-step problem. We have to undo this multiplication. So 2 times x, we want to do the opposite. Divide by 2 and divide by 2. Now I'm seeing some good things here with remembering to flip your sign, but sometimes we're doing it when we don't need to or when we're not supposed to. So in this case, since our coefficient, this number next to our variable 2, is not negative, we do not flip the sign. We're going to keep it greater than. It does not matter if this number over here on the other side is negative or positive. The only number that matters when we're flipping our signs is this number, and since it's not negative, we're not going to flip it. So 2 divided by 2, obviously that gives us 1, so we have x on that side is greater than negative 22 divided by 2 would be 11, and one number is negative in your division problem, so your answer is going to be negative. So x is greater than negative 11. Okay, so then to graph, do this down here, maybe I'll do that in red. Here's my graph. Negative 11 goes in the middle. And x has to be greater than negative 11, so open our circle up and go greater than, because our numbers get bigger going to the right. Alright, so that's that one. And then to check, let's do that over here. So to check, I'm just going to plug in any number that is greater than negative 11. I really like to use 0 if it's not always possible, but if I can use it, I want to, because it makes the problem easier. So instead of x, I'm going to rewrite it, but put in 0. So 2 times 0 plus 3 should be larger than negative 16. Okay, and 0 plus 3, we can do that right away because it's in our parentheses, so that's 3. Alright, and then rewrite everything else. I did that, so 2 times 3 should be greater than negative 16. And then 2 times 3 is 6, which is greater than negative 16. Okay, I know this checking part takes a lot longer, and that is difficult for some of you. This is our number 1 and 2 concern right now. This is not going to be mandatory for achieving a proficient score on the test. The good thing about this is if it checks out, you know that you did this part and this part right. Okay, but that's how you check those. Alright, so at this time I'd like you to stop the video and try this problem. So number 2, negative 10 times y plus 6 is less than or equal to 60. I want you to go ahead and try it. We want you to solve it, graph it, and then try to check it. And then once you're done, go ahead and you can play through me doing it and see if you got the right answer. Alright, so by now you should have done this problem. If not, pause the video now until you're done, and then follow along with me once you're done. So the first thing I'm going to do here is find my distributive property. We have negative 10 times y plus 6 is less than 60. So here's my distributive property. I found my parentheses and my number outside of it being multiplied. So I'm going to go negative 10 times y. So I'm going to do that first. Negative 10 times y is negative 10y. And then plus negative 10 times 6, that would be negative 60. Be careful with your signs. And that is less than or equal to 60. Remember, again, we're not distributing this negative 10 to this 60. It's not in our parentheses, and it's on the other side of the inequality. All right, so now I'm left with a two-stepper. Let's go here. Let's get rid of our adding or subtracting first. We have a negative 60. Canceling that out by adding 60 plus 60 plus 60. And we're left with negative 10y is less than or equal to 120. And now is where we're going to get to the part that's maybe going to trip some people up. So try to focus here the best that you can. We have negative 10 times y is less than or equal to 120. Okay, so we want to undo this multiplication. To do that, we want to divide instead of multiply by what's being multiplied, which is negative 10, to both sides. Remember, we're dividing by a negative 10 because a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and we always want our variable to be positive. So this cancels out. That cancels out, and you're left with y. And then over here, 120 divided by negative 10. Well, 10 can go into 120 12 times. So I'm going to go ahead and put 12 here. One number is negative, so my answer is negative. Notice I have not transferred down my inequality sign yet. I haven't done that because we're going to have a flip of the sign here. You notice that I divided by a negative by my variable. That means I do have to switch it, unlike last problem. So instead of less than or equal to, it's going to flip to greater than or equal to negative 12. Okay, because we divided by a negative, and that would be the same thing as if we multiplied by a negative. So now to graph, I'm going to go ahead here, put a nice graph. I'm going to put negative 12 right in the middle. I always start with an open circle, and y has to be larger than, so I'm going to go to my right because those are larger. Okay, and since it can also equal negative 12, one of the solutions can be negative 12. I'm going to go ahead and fill in my circle. Okay, so then the only thing we have left to do here is check. Now again, any number less or greater than negative 12 can be my solution. So again, in this case, 0 works again. It won't always work. It has to be part of your solution, but 0 would fall on my number line somewhere over here, so I can use it. So I'm going to put in 0 for y. I'm going to do this, try to squeeze this in up here. I apologize if it's hard to follow. I'm running out of room. So I'm going to go negative 10 times 0 plus 6, and that should be less than or equal to 60. So all I did there is instead of using y, I put in one of my solutions, which could be 0 up here. And then now you know that 0 plus 6 is 6. So really we're going to have negative 10 times 6, and that should be less than or equal to 60. And negative 10 times 6 is negative 60. So what you're going to see here is negative 60 is less than or equal to 60. And, of course, negative 60 is much less than 60, so that works. So that went ahead and checked out. So that's my check. Alright, we're going to follow the same rules in number 3. This one I think it would be good if you followed along with me, and then we'll try number 4 on our own. This one it's going to be pretty much the same, it's just that we're using fractions here. So again, let's be really smart and use a calculator so we don't have to worry about little mistakes, and go ahead and put in your negatives when you do this. So the first thing we're going to do is 3 times negative 10 over 3 x, because we're going to start with the distributive property. And when I do 3 times negative 10 over 3x, I actually get negative 10. Negative 10x, of course, we got to carry that variable. And then I'm also going to do 3 times 3 halves, and when I do that, I get, so I'm going to go ahead and do 3 times 3 halves, and I get 4.5. And I just plugged that right in my calculator as I was doing that. 4 1/2. And then we want to go ahead and throw in my plus sign to separate these. I'm going to bring that down. Okay, and that's going to be greater than or equal to 79 over 2. Alright, so now we're left with a two-step. We got to get rid of 4.5 next, so I'm going to go ahead and subtract minus 4 1/2 minus 4 1/2. Gets tricky here if you're not using a calculator. It can be done, but there's a much higher chance of making an error if you don't use one, so I'm going to be left with negative 10x, because these cancel out, and that's going to be greater than or equal to 79.5 minus 4.5. And when you do that and you put that in your calculator, it's going to give me, in my calculator, it gave me 35 over 10. Okay, 35 over 10. And that should be positive 35 over 10. I'm sorry, not 35 over 10, just 35. I thought that was wrong as I was doing that in my head. So that's going to end up simplifying to just 35. So if you catch that, please, just 35 over here. So 79 halves minus 4.5 is 35. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and divide by negative 10. Divide by negative 10. Hopefully you're catching something we're going to have to do with my sign when we do that. So negative 10 divided by negative 10 is a positive 1, so we're just left with x over here. But we did divide by a negative next to our variable, so we need to flip this guy. And remember, that would be the same if you happen to multiply. So we're going to flip it. And 35 divided by negative 10, that's going to end up being negative 3.5. Now that could be in another form. Negative 3 1/2. Okay, that could be in another form, like you could have 7 halves would be fine, negative 7 halves. Okay, or the decimal version, negative 3.5 would be fine too. But x, in this case, I'm going to use x is less than or equal to negative 3.5. Note, I did not mean to do that. We flipped the sign here to being less than or equal to. So now, in my graph, I'm going to go ahead and put my solution of negative 3.5 right in the middle. Negative 3.5. And x has to be less than that, so this time it's going to go this way. So in this case, guys, and I got to worry about my circle, right? It is less than or equal to, so I'm going to fill it in. Now in this case, when you check, you cannot use 0 because 0 is not part of our solution. It has to be negative 3.5 or smaller, so going that way. So I'm going to use the closest whole number, so negative 3.5. The smallest whole number closest to that would be negative 4. And then you go ahead, you could throw it into this solution or this solution, but to check, you would just go ahead and put in negative 4. You could put negative 5, negative 10, any of those. And then if you did do that, I did do it on my sheet of paper here, it does check out to be greater than or equal to 79.5, whatever solution you use. Just be careful when you go ahead and back and do that. It's a little tricky with the fractions. Because of room, I'm not going to do that on this one. Alright, here we are on the last problem of today's lesson. I would like you to stop the video at this time, go ahead and try this problem, and then once you're done, if you want to go ahead and play it and see how you did, if you're pretty confident and you want to fast forward this till the end just to see what I get for the solution, that would be totally fine. Okay, but go ahead and try this problem. So stop the video and try it. Okay, at this time you should have tried the problem and see how you do compared to me. If you want to just fast forward and go to the solution, that would be fine too if you think you got it. Alright, so here we go. First thing I'm going to do here is the distributive property. So I'm going to have negative 3 times 2.8. And when I do that, I'm going to get 8.4. And then it would be negative because one of my numbers here is negative. And then it's going to be negative 3 times negative 2.9y. So we have two negatives, so we're going to end up with a positive solution. So plus, and negative 3 times 2.9 is 8.7y. Just don't forget to attach your variable. And that should be less than negative 31.89. Now here, a possible place to make a mistake, we have negative 8.4 and negative 31.89. You have two negatives, so when you end up adding here 8.4, you're going to add 8.4 here. So remember here when we do this, we need to actually subtract these because their signs are different. 31.89 minus 8.4 equals 23.49. I have more negatives than I do positives, so I'm going to go ahead and keep it negative, and that is going to be less than this side, which would just be left with, that crosses out, 8.7 y. Okay, and now I'm left with a one step. Okay, I'm going to divide to get rid of this multiplication between these two. So divide by 8.7 and divide by 8.7, and y is less than 23.49 negative divided by 8.7, which should give you 2.7. And just be very careful. We have one negative, one positive, so my answer needs to be negative here. So then when I go ahead and graph these, y has to be less than negative 2.7, so negative 2.7 in the middle has to be less than, so it's going to go that way. Open circle because it cannot equal, it cannot be a solution because we don't have the equal to sign underneath my inequality. Okay, and that one will give you guys a break. You don't have to check it, so we can get going on our homework. Why don't we check about half of the problems on your homework tonight so that it doesn't take you too long.